Hello and welcome to 8.4, day 1. We're factoring again, but we're doing a not equal to 1. So previously we've factored these ones up here like this x squared plus 5x plus 6, where we knew to factor it, we would have parentheses, and we knew that I had to have an x and an x because it had to be x squared. Now we're going to be converting from the same standard form to factored form. But it's going to be slightly different now because I'm going to have something like 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. And so I'm not going to need just an x and an x, I'm going to need 2x and x for my beginning. So it's going to be a slightly different method but very similar. So when I have ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is not equal to 1, I have to multiply a and c together to get the top of my diamond. And I still want to add to the middle term, which is b. So this is our first example. Follow along and then see where you have questions. So I'm going to first multiply 2 and 5, and I get 10. So that's what I'm trying to multiply to. And I'm still trying to add to my middle term, which is 11. So factors of 10 that add to 11 are 10 and 1. Now I can't jump to my answer and write this. I can't do this. Okay, I got my parentheses, x and x like before, and 10 and 1. That just doesn't work for this one because I now need a 2x rather than an x and an x, and I can't just change that. So we're going to use our factoring by grouping method that we did last time, and all you're going to want to do is split up this middle term into its two factors. So the first term stays the same. To get the second and third term, I'm going to use these two factors over here, 10 and 1. So I'm going to have a 10x and a 1x. And the last term stays the same. So notice the 11x has now just become a 10x plus a 1x, which still adds to 11x. Now I have 4 terms, and this goes nicely with my factoring by grouping. Remember, you group the first 2 and the last 2. And then you start factoring out what they have in common. So the first one has a 2x in common. So when I factor out a 2x, I'm left with an x. And when I factor out a 2x from 10, I'm left with 5. The second one, a 1x and a 5x, has nothing in common, so I just write a 1 out front. Now my parentheses match. So I can take my parentheses and put that out front. And then the leftovers, because this is gone, and this is gone, go in the next set, so it's 2x plus 1. And then it says always check, does it work if I FOIL it out again? So I'm going to check some of these, but not all for sake of time. So I'm going to FOIL this just to make sure it gets me the correct answer. So I get 2x squared. X times 1 is 1x. 5 times 2x is 10x. And 5 times 1 is 5. My middle term adds to 11x. So I got my answer checked. I factored it correctly. Alright, so we're going to start with some easy ones. So if you wanted to pause the video and try the next one based on the first example, that's fine. If you want to watch another example before trying it, that's fine as well. So again, I multiply the first term 3 and the last term 7 to get the top of my diamond. So I want to multiply to 21. I want to add to 22. So that's my middle term. Factors are 1 and 21. Multiplies to 21, adds to 22. I want to break up this middle term into a 1x and a 21x. The last term stays the same. The first term stays the same. Next I group. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. And what's nice is it doesn't matter if I write the 21x first or the 1x. You're still going to get the same answer. So what I can factor out of a 3x squared and a 1x is just an x. So I'm left with 3x plus 1. 21x and 7 have a 7 in common. You want to carry this sign, this plus sign down, because I'm factoring out a positive 7, and I'm left with 3x plus 1 as well. Now my parentheses match, so I pull that out front. And then the leftovers get written in the next set of parentheses, so it's x plus 7. And I'm going to so that is my answer right there, but again, you want to check to make sure it's the correct answer, so I'm going to box it with my crappy box, but it's still good. But I am going to just check, so 3 times x is 3x squared. That goes in line with my answer. 3 times 7 is 21x. 1 times x is 1x. And 1 times 7 is 7. Check my middle term, that is 22x. So I've done it correctly. I'm not going to check that many more on this, but make sure you always double check your answers. Alright, the next one, I want you to pause the video and at least try to fill out your diamond and get your factors. If you can try it all the way through, go ahead. So I'm going to multiply the first number and the last number. 2 times 3 is 6. I'm going to multiply to 6, add to 7, so that's 6 and 1. You're going to split up your middle term into 6x and 1x. First term stays the same. Last term stays the same. Now I'm going to use my factoring by grouping method. So I group the first two and the last two. Keep the plus sign out. Out of this one I can factor a 2x, so I'm left with x plus 3. This one I can't factor anything out, so I just write a 1 out front. Now my parentheses match. Let's see if I can get my page to go down. Well, I can't, so I take out the x plus 3. It's gone. So I write the leftovers next, 2x plus 1. And again, that is the answer, but you should always check by foiling, but I'm not going to, so you can do that on your own. Alright, so next one, we're going to change it up and not just work with positives now, but have some negatives. So still, multiply the first and the last, so 2 times 5 is 10. Add to the middle term, which is negative 7. If I want to multiply to a positive and add to a negative, both of my factors need to be negative. So it's 2 and 5, but they both need to be negative because a negative times a negative is a positive. Negative plus a negative stays negative, and it's negative 7. So we're going to split this middle term up into negative 2x and negative 5x. First term stays the same, last term stays the same. Now this one you need to pay attention to this negative right here. So when I group the first two and that doesn't cause a problem, but when I group the second two, that negative was really only with the 5x, so when it gets pulled out it really changes this sign here to a negative. So I'm just going to, whenever you see a negative in the middle, change the sign of that last one. So I can factor out a 2x out of the first one and I'm left with x minus 1. That negative sign stays, so drag it down. I can factor a 5 out and I'm left with an x minus 1. Now if you forgot to change that sign, you'd notice that your parentheses didn't match, but mine do because I remembered to change the sign. So now my parentheses match, I'm left with x minus 1. Those are now gone. I write the leftovers in the next set of parentheses, so it's 2x minus 5. And again, you're going to want to FOIL it out to check, but I'm not going to on this part because you can do that on your own. I don't want you to watch a 25-minute video. It still is going to be pretty long. Alright, I want you to pause the video and try the next one on your own. Alright, so you want to multiply to 12, add to a negative 7. Again, I want to multiply to a positive, add to a negative, so both of my factors need to be negative. 4 and 3 multiplies to 12, but doesn't add to a negative, so I need to make both my factors negative. Again, you split up that middle term to negative 4x and negative 3x. The first term stays the same, last term stays the same. Now I have 4 terms and it's again the same. It's going to get a little repetitive, but you do want to practice different types. You group. Now notice that negative's in the middle, so it changes the sign to a negative here. I can factor a 2x out of the first one and I'm left with x minus 2. Drag that negative sign down and I can factor out a 3 and I'm left with x minus 2. My parentheses now match, so I can FOIL that out and I'm left with x minus 2. Those are gone. The leftovers go in the next set of parentheses, so that's the 2x minus 3. And that's my answer. Again, you're going to want to check it, but for the sake of time for this video, you can check that on your own. Right now we get to one where the last term is negative. So we're adding in just more negatives. It's the same process every time. There's just a couple slight variations. So I want to multiply my first number and my last one. And my last one's a negative 8. So 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. And I want to add to a positive 2. All right, so I'm thinking 6 and 4 because I know that that could add to 2 in some way. So if I want to multiply to a negative, one of my factors needs to be negative. So I could make the 6 negative or the 4 negative. But I want to add to a positive, so the smaller one needs to be made negative. So what I like to do, first term stays the same. I'm splitting up the middle term, but I like to write the negative one first. So I'm going to write the negative 4x and then the 6x. because then I don't have to deal with that negative in the middle when I group. So if I group them, I have a positive in the middle here, so I don't need to change any signs. So out of the first one, a 3 and a 4 have nothing in common. So I'm just going to factor out an x, which leaves me with 3x minus 4 on the inside. The next one, a 6x and an 8 have a 2 in common. When I take away, divide the 6 by 2, I get 3. When I divide the 8 by 2, I get 4. And my parentheses now match, so I'm going to factor that out front. So those are gone. The leftovers get written in the next set of parentheses, so I'm left with x plus 2. Again, I would FOIL it out to check, but for the sake of time on this one, do that on your own. Alright, and our last one here is when we have both terms negative. And again, I'm breaking it down with headings, but really it's the same process. You just have to be cautious of your negatives. So I'm going to multiply to a negative 6, because 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. I'm going to add to a negative 5. So 2 and 3 adds to 5, but that wouldn't multiply to a negative 6 because I'd have to make them both negative to add to a negative 5. So really the factors you're looking at are 6 and 1. Since I want to add to a negative, the bigger one needs to be made negative. Again, splitting up your term here. First term stays the same. Middle term gets split up into negative 6x and positive 1x, and the last term stays the same. Again, I like to write the negative factor first so it doesn't throw me off. So I'm going to group them. First thing I can pull out is a 3x, which leaves me with x minus 2. Carry down that plus sign. I can factor out nothing from the second set, so whenever you can't factor out anything, you write a 1. Left with x minus 2. My parentheses now match. So I can write that out front, x minus 2. Those are now gone. The leftovers go in the second set. So I'm left with 3x plus 1. Whoops, I forgot to write the 1. And again, I'll FOIL this one out just to show you each time you do this, you should FOIL this out to see if it matches. So you get 3x squared plus 1x minus 6x minus 2. Add your like terms in the middle here, and that is a negative 5x. So I've gotten my factoring right, so this is my final answer. Alright, so go ahead and try the on your own tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.